It's 9:01 on the 21st of January 2022. Welcome to the MTT News of the Week. Our stories. Yeah, cool. Hello, Jen. Cool. Our stories for this week, we've got Johnson. Boris Johnson might be facing a vote of no confidence from his own party. Maybe Johnson will be out soon. We'll see. COVID, an update on COVID from the US. The US is going to stop counting COVID deaths. And there's also been a very prominent positive case of COVID somewhere high at the top of the US military. Tonga experienced a huge volcanic eruption, which has cut it off for most of the week. We'll be talking about that. Venezuela, there's been an update in a situation change in Venezuela regarding a potential move to try and oust Maduro using parliamentary means. We'll be talking about that. China experienced or has released its statistics, its GDP growth statistics for last year. We'll be telling you what that is and discussing it and looking at it and comparing it. Novak Djokovic was not able to attend the Australian Open to play tennis. His visa was revoked, ending that story. We'll be talking about lithium mining in Chile and some of the contracts that the leader of the country released or sort of opened up as he left. As we know, of course, a leftist, quote unquote, government has taken over. We'll talk about the last government before that. A big story in Sheikh Jarrah, Palestine. A Palestinian family has been evicted by the Israeli apartheid forces. We'll be talking about that. The Houthis have managed to attack an oil facility, an oil rig, I think an oil, I suppose, ship. We'll be covering that too, in the UAE, not in Yemen. So that's quite interesting. Then we'll be talking about, of course, a robotic yak that has been unveiled, the biggest quadruped robot in the world. We'll also be talking about that. But our first story is, of course, Ukraine, the situation in Ukraine, which Jin will now update us on. So what's happening in Ukraine, Jin? We've been talking about this for a while.
Yeah.
Is it coming to a head? What do you think?
Well, no. It's this fundamental kind of conflict that stems out of the existential nature of what NATO is, and what it means for the Russian Slavic people to like have their sovereignty. Like these two things are not compatible. They cannot coexist, and that is why it's not coming to an end. The most that we have ever seen is a wave like up and down kind of the development in terms of military and political tension, and that's what we saw this week. It ticked back up again. Supposedly, it was assumed, because that's how typically it works in history, that when the kind of leaders of two sides that are in conflict speak, they are going to resolve the conflict and decrease the tension. That was the hopes. That was between Biden and Putin, of course. That was not the case.
Sure.
And NATO has basically said that basically is threatening Russia with this kind of surrender or else message. And Russia, of course, cannot possibly agree to that, because that's how you get colonized. So, of course, this week, tension is back up, and well, what we're seeing is Russia making I guess I should say the Union State now, is, with what we're seeing with the Union State of Russia and Belarus, the Collective Treaty Organization, and their behavior with Kazakhstan.
Yeah.
And this week's kind of action of the Russia is now being able to kind of remanufacture and modernize some of the lost techs of the Soviet era. One of which is the Tupolev 160 White Swan, nickname supersonic strategic nuclear bomber. They're now able to not only manufacture it but also modernize it to and this Tupolev 160M, M stands for modernized, is along with their newly reconstituted the Russian military, which is based off of, once again, the Soviet model of highly intense near-peer land conflict. Because previously, everybody followed the U.S. military's model of, there will be no more total wars. We will just be conducting counter-terrorism, as in like doing imperialism, seal clubbing minor nations who doesn't even have much of a military. That was the trend. So Americans kind of use the term, we are now a digital modern army. So we don't need to be as big anymore. We can use less troops to cover more ground because our weapons are more interconnected, and you can target stuff using GPS and whatnot. That was, at least as far as the Americans are concerned, that was a big fat lie. It just decreased. I mean, you served in NATO, that just straight up decreased the conventional warfighting capabilities of the imperialist Western nations. So what happened in Russia and China is that they took that idea seriously, but they didn't believe in like just converting their whole military into an expansionist, anti-terrorist peacekeeping a-hole of a nation. So like combining those ideas of a modern kind of information battlefield with the big
be united.
With the big conventional near-peer conflict based army has really put Russia and China, of course, in a position where NATO, because it shot itself in the foot, is in no position to threaten Russia. But everybody in NATO seems to want to display the image that of like, hey, let's threaten Russia. They're weak and surrender or else. Which is just, leads to this existential problem. It's gotten us to this point where this conflict will never end. It's absolutely, once you see through all the smoke and mirrors from both sides, it's sad. Sad in a comedic way. Yeah, that should be all.
Sure.
I mean,
the New York Times.
There was some technical issues, and we're talking over each other because it's lagging.
Right.
Go ahead, Richard.
That's okay. Yeah. So one of the articles that came up on the New York Times was that this would be a moment for NATO to unify against Russia. So if you remember, there's that quote. I forgot who it was. It might have been Churchill. It might have been someone else. The point of NATO is to keep the Germans down, keep the Americans in, and keep the Russians out. I believe that's the expression. Something along
that was the first.
The first NATO Secretary General.
Secretary.
So there we go. That was it. So you have to remember that was the reason, right? So obviously it was Cold War, but America in, Germany down, and Russia out. That's the grand sort of statement. But also you've got to look on some other, from the sort of the grand, like highest angle of geopolitics is what's that other? I think it might have been Brzezinski. I don't know who it was. There's the other, geostrategist, which says, do not never ever let a grand Eurasian bloc form, a political bloc form. And so you've got on the east side, you've of course got the tensions with Taiwan, with the South China Sea, with Japan, with Korea. You have that side. And of course, then you have the Kazakhstan situation, which we just saw. You also have India, the attempts to try and turn India and break apart BRICS. But on the Western side, you also have this Ukrainian thing. But I mean, I think we should also wind back the clock. So if we're going to try and look at this and understand this, because you're going, there's 100,000 troops on the border. So we just arrived at this moment that they just turned up there. No, there's a lot of history. Right? So I mean, I'm not going to go back into all of the history. I mean, we could go back to the Soviet Union and where the Khrushchev made Ukraine and all that kind of stuff. But talking about, this is 30 years after the break of the Soviet Union. The deal, if I'm not mistaken, with Gorbachev when the Cold War ended in Reykjavik was NATO will not go beyond Berlin. Will not go east of Berlin. And I mean, now
they broke the promise.
Now
yet
NATO
they do.
is in. Now you have former Soviet republics which are in NATO, and we have a really big former Soviet republic Ukraine, which they are put. The idea is that they will enter NATO. So those are the sort of first things I'd like to say. Secondly, we mentioned this last week, Cuban Missile Crisis. If you can understand the logic of the Cuban Missile Crisis, that the US does not want nuclear missiles or any sort of strategic capabilities right on its doorstep, I think you can then understand why Ukraine is the same for Russia. Don't put a nuke in my face, bro. Like, basically, that's what it is, right? So,
yeah, certainly. The last thing I want to mention is I've spoken to some people who are strategists of one kind or another in China back in the beginnings of 2020, which at this point is 2 years ago. Because I remember having this conversation in January of 2020 specifically. And one of them said a very remarkable thing to me that I still remember to this day, and it's definitely going to be relevant coming forward, which is that a nation under biological threat, under pandemic, under epidemic, does not have the right nor the power to engage in war. Because as soon as you want to fight a war, all your troops are concentrated into one spot. They catch whatever disease, and then before you know it, everybody's sick and can't do anything. So the very act of concentrating human beings, which is the basis for not just war fighting, but just work, labor, and production, and the function of society in general. I mean, if that's not possible, then nothing is. And so, that really stuck with me, and I think that really connects well to story, which is, of course, COVID again. So, of course, how does that reflect? Well, the U.S., the general chief of staff has been infected with COVID, right? The joint chief of staff, Mark Milley, has caught COVID, and that is confirmed by English-speaking news sources. What is not confirmed by English-speaking news sources, but a member of the Chinese National Ministry of Security on a personal, not a personal, but just informal basis, has said that on this internet program that is with a semi-official Chinese media called guancha.com, or Observer as translated to English, basically has said that the U.S. the 1st Brigade of the U.S. 1st Cavalry Division, half of them has all been infected with Omicron.
That's pretty diabolical. So
so that was that was a few days ago, at least 4, if not 5 days ago. I couldn't remember exactly. But as soon as I heard that, I was like, well, that's not going to be when you have 1,000 something people in a close knit kind of a living arrangement called a barrack, right, or a military base. To just be like that, what on earth does that mean? It means that everything that came into contact with them is probably also infected as well.
Yeah. I mean, I assume, obviously, bear in mind the Russian troops are also masked up, so it'll be interesting to see if those 100,000 troops also have a COVID outbreak too. I think just one more point I didn't mention was specifically on NATO unity. France and Germany are not happy with this idea of Biden, and particularly the US, having to be their voice in this exchange, in this Ukrainian situation. So the very specifics on it is, again, that gas pipeline. Russia, controls and has the majority of the gas that is sent to Europe to heat homes during winter, it's Russian gas. So it's all very nice to have the US roll in and sort of, rattle the saber and promote this government that they've put up in Ukraine.
And then during the middle of winter, people freeze.
Right, and then but so American citizens are not going to be paying the price of freezing to death in their homes.
Right.
So Macron and Merkel are not as happy as you would think they are about this thing.
Yeah,
that's one thing. There was an analysis that this will unify NATO because it gives it purpose again. But does it really? Because the world is more integrated than it was in the Cold War, so it's not so easy to just sort of make threats and do these kinds of things.
For sure.
And just on that final point, sorry, for 2014, if anyone just need to remind yourselves of how we got to Ukraine, the Ukraine situation is go and listen to Victoria Nuland's speech, or sorry, not speech, but her tapped phone call where she's caught mentioning that how they're going to conduct statecraft. So which leader they would like to take over Ukraine, Klitschko or whatever it was. And then she swears, she says, F the EU. If that phone call, just Google Victoria Nuland phone call, and you'll see that the situation that we arrived at is not by any means a choice by the Ukrainian people. It's definitely not that simple. And U.S. meddling, imperialism meddling is certainly at play. Let's move on from Ukraine, maybe, unless you have a final thought there.
I just wanted to point out the fact that as soon as this whole Ukraine business happened, Angela Merkel back in the day, this was last year, before our program even started, met with some Russian leaders, and even Putin himself right away to kind of discuss exactly what you just said. I just wanted to add to that. But let's move on to the
COVID story. So you said the US is not going to report COVID deaths?
Yes, there's been reports of the U.S. health departments, all of them, basically saying that from starting February 2nd, which is only 13 days from as we speak right now in the United States local time, they're not going to be recording COVID death numbers anymore.
Wow. Okay.
I mean, so, as we talked about before, why we keep talking about COVID is not just because that it's a terrible disaster. It's because it is fundamentally tearing down the fabrics of civilization, because civilization is when people come together to do stuff. Right, ever since the old Neolithic, ever since the Stone Age. I'm
gonna keep that quote there, Jin. So, civilization is where people come together and do stuff. It's good. It's good.
And also, that's of course why we need to be socialists, because that's what it means to be civilization, right? But anyways, let's. Okay. So, as we understand from a few episodes ago. Yes. That Omicron has this nasty tendency of staying dormant in the body and attacking the body nonstop, relentlessly, through combining with the ACE2 receptor. And that was our first clue. The second clue is that Omicron was possibly spread into the United States back during November of 2021 of last year, during some anime convention. I mean, there's a whole bunch of jokes to be made there. We still haven't finished them all, by the way. Okay, I'm gonna say it. The only time anime weeb leaves the house, they spread the pandemic. Okay, I'm done. All right. And then our third clue is that the U.S. military is getting severely affected. The chief of staff. That's like
right.
Joint chief of staff is like the person in terms of military ranking right below the president in terms of like being able to call troops to like do that right now in terms of that kind of thinking, right? All of that is just ridden with just the plague at this point. What does that possibly mean for the American society? Well, it means that if they keep reporting COVID deaths from February, right? And there's another report coming out that the United States, the Guardian news, from the Guardian, they say that most Americans will catch Omicron. And we understood from Imperial College study that it's no less lethal than Delta. The data is just biased, right? What does that mean? Well, put it simply, if they keep recording numbers from February, they're going to see just all sorts of wild. I mean, anybody has a calculator at their home or on them because you have a cell phone or something? Just like 400 million, which is the American population, roughly speaking, multiplied by whatever percentage of COVID death, directly acute COVID death and long-term COVID death, which we don't know. That's an awfully terrifying number. That is so terrifying.
Yeah, it's a lot of people.
I want to report it. And it's called deceit and laziness. That's what they're doing. Sure. So, and one last
thing. I just want to add one thing, Jen. Sorry. Just on the reporting. So just for people to know that it's not all deaths. It's daily deaths. So hospitals are no longer required to report the previous day's COVID-19 deaths. So I think there still will be tracking some data, but it would be months.
Way more room for calibration.
Yeah,
take a jab at the Taiwanese illegitimate regime. They said that they're going to. This was early last year, by the way. Yeah. The Tsai Ing-wen DPP regime basically said that they're going to calibrate the statistics of COVID, which of course caused huge outrage, right, across the entire Chinese-speaking community. Like, what on earth is that? But now Americans are also doing it, so go figure.
Sure. It sounds to me, if I was to analyze this, it sounds to me like they're trying to reduce the amount of the extent that people are aware of how many people are dying. So there still will be data on how many people are dying, but I guess trying to make things less focused on how many people are dying every day by not having the daily death statistic. So making it like over the last 6 months, this many people died, or over the last month.
There is one more point to mention, which is that the life expectancy of the American population has already gone down by 1.3 years. 1.3 years. Yeah.
Because of COVID?
Because of COVID. That's more than World War II, by the way.
That's actually pretty. Yeah, it's already killed more than World War II did, right? So
right, but even like in proportion, because also back in the day, U.S. didn't have 400 million people.
Right. Fair enough. Okay, let's move on to Tonga. So there was 1 second. Is that correct? Yes, that's correct. Yeah, Tonga. Let's move on to Tonga. There was a huge volcano that erupted in Tonga. I think it's one of the biggest in a long time, in decades. And basically, what was particular? I mean, obviously, there's always natural disasters. They happen quite regularly: floods, earthquakes, hurricanes, these kinds of things. However, what's important to note about this one, I think, is that the whole country. It's not a big country. It's an island nation in the Pacific. A chain of islands, I should say.
Right.
And is that they obviously have an undersea cable. So if you're not aware, most of the world, all of the world is connected through undersea cables, a number of them, many of them, all over the place. And obviously Tonga has their cable, which connects them to everyone else, particularly through the internet for telephones. And this thing was either damaged or severed. And no one could basically get in touch with Tonga. There was very limited communication. So there were satellite images and I assume some basic radio communications. But overall, broadly speaking, there was a number of days where, news agencies, the BBC or whoever, could only report in the abstract and show satellite footage, which, underlies and reminds us of sort of obviously the power of nature. It's the forces of physics, the planetary forces are extremely, extremely powerful, and that and leaving yourself vulnerable like this, even a whole country can be cut off, and basically they were no longer a part of the world. They were just an island nation by themselves, a country. Lots of people living there. So. Yeah. Any thoughts on this, Jen? About
there's lots that can be said about this. I think it needs to be said about this. It's a this essentially shows everyone the importance of not just socialism or anything, but proper things that could only be possible in socialism. Proper social design, proper systems design, proper centralization and decentralization. Okay, so let's go down these points one at a time. One is that we must avoid atomization as recommended by neoliberalism and postmodernism. Why is because exactly stuff like this. If you are, the smaller you are, the less is your ability to deal with disasters. Disaster, whether man-made or completely just freak of nature like this one. I mean, nobody was at fault for the volcano going off.
Sure.
Yeah. But nevertheless, as a society, as a human civilization, as one people, we need to increase our ability to deal with these kinds of things. That's the only way we're going to have, again, civilization. Because civilization is based off of the assumption of cooperation. Cooperation is only possible when our kind of lives are there's a promise to for human life to be taken care of, to be respected, right? And of course, we've seen plenty of disasters. So I'm gonna bring together 4 kind of incidents: the Tonga volcano incident, the tornado that just happened a few weeks ago in Kentucky.
Yes.
The Japan earthquake, Japanese earthquake, only a decade ago, in 2008, and the Chinese Wenchuan earthquake in the Sichuan province. Those are all like magnitude 7.8 and magnitude 8.1 earthquakes. Huge stuff.
Right.
Anytime when this kind of stuff happens, the place itself, like you said, is just instantaneously, at the snap of a finger, cut off. They cannot really help themselves because the resources that was keeping people alive and they could have been allocated to help people with any kind of small disaster like a fire or anything is gone.
Right.
It's just fundamentally gone. That was true for all 4 of these cases.
Yeah.
So then what do you need to do? Well, you need outside help. But this outside help also needs to have no barrier with the place that needs to be helped. And also, in all sorts of senses, like societal and technological, technology, they need to be interconnected, and of course legally. And then you need to also have the ability to, one, make sense of the situation. Any kind of earthquake, especially a volcano, it's extremely difficult. I mean, it literally blocks out the sky, right?
Yes.
Earthquake, when buildings catch on fire, when entire cities will catch on fire afterwards, there will be so much buildup in the air that you cannot really see what's going on.
Yeah.
So then you need you need a comprehensive rescue plan, rescue and relief plan that will require land, sea, and air. For Tonga situations, this is even worse because there's only sea and air.
Right.
But if the roads are blocked because and the ports are messed up, because that's by definition what these kind of geological disasters and meteorological disasters tend to do, you can't even get there. To get in, the very act of getting in there is a challenge, is a Herculean challenge in itself. So what do you need? You need quantity. You need a tremendous quantity and quality of emergency response on behalf of a centralized state or whatever control mechanism, maybe an alliance of many small nations, like a pact or something.
Sure.
Under one centralized command, but at the same time has a very high amount of flexibility of how to continue to operate when communication is cut off and you cannot be coordinated by some higher up. That requires every man, woman, and child to have the understanding of the spirit of ownership of the society, which is very socialist thing. But at the same time, you need a kind of understand a very logical understanding of what is my contribution. How do I fit into this society? How do I contribute? What part of a game can I play? How can I help?
Right.
To then kind of not be individualistic so that people can immediately structure together to help out the neighborhood. And these are all very socialist things that we have seen in many, many traditional societies all across the world. Mm-hmm. But it is this kind of atomization and this kind of absolutely nonsensical. And I don't mean this in offense to any British person, but the fundamentally conceptually British kind of diplomatic international relations, how everything is based on exchange of interest, is based on geopolitics, is based on competition, is based on resource, is based on like where is all the important choke points of the world. Okay, I found one now. Let me put a military base there. That kind of thinking clearly does not help. When the peoples of the world and the nations of the world need to come together and to work together for the interest, in service of the people, right? And if we can't have that, we're going to continuously see like every time there's a natural disaster, like unneeded casualty.
Unneeded, right? Exactly. That's it. I think that. I mean, luckily, it took a few days, but the New Zealand did manage to send some Navy ships to help out. But I agree with what you're saying there in terms of leaving smaller nations to be vulnerable like this. I mean, talking about alliances, so obviously not NATO in this case, but it stresses the importance of solidarity, of working together, of nations building things and having mutual interests rather than this person doing everything by themselves and having no relationship with each other. So
I mean, New Zealand
I mention here is just about autarky. So it's all well and good thinking that you can do everything yourself, but there will be a disaster, an emergency, a crisis. So yes, you shouldn't become dependent on other nations, and you should try and build your own capabilities, but you should also try and integrate and have something that we can all draw from, whether it's a shared emergency fleet or more than a more robust communications network that everyone chips into. There's different things to think about, but you shouldn't do everything yourself. Try and have some fail safes where we all chip in for something. I think we can all get behind that idea. But let's hope that the people of Tonga can recover and things are not too bad for them there in the islands, on the islands there. Let's move on to speaking about British politics and Britishness. As we spoke about last week, Boris Johnson's hypersonic pig heart. Boris Johnson is facing right now a potential vote of no confidence. It's unraveling right now, so it's a story that's fresh. It's happening. It's not finished. So if you haven't followed, you didn't watch last week, during 2020, during lockdown, big lockdown, heavy lockdown, no gatherings, you're only allowed to go outside and be 1 meter away from someone else who is not from your household, only one person. These are all the regulations that were imposed in the UK to stop, I think that was the first or second wave, but nonetheless to stop COVID. And of course, this was from the government. The government said, don't do this, don't do this, do that, don't do that. And they were not following those rules. So at 10 Downing Street, number 10 Downing Street, they were having these work meetings. The first of this story was the wine and cheese party. Sorry, my camera's blurry. Wine and cheese party business meeting, which they had at 10 Downing Street, which was funny, kind of controversial, ha ha ha. And now we're seeing that actually, no, there were more of these things. And it's obviously pissing a lot of people, a lot of British people off, because it ties into this idea of one set of rules for our rulers and one set of rules for us commoners, these plebs. So just to give you the update of what's changed, it's getting very, very, very messy by British political standards. So you've got in the House of Commons, you've of course got Boris Johnson, who went out last week and got berated. But now, at another session of PMQ's Prime Minister's Questions, a Tory MP walked across the floor and defected, if you want to use that terminology, to the other side, joined Labour, and has now been making speeches with Andy Burnham and other characters from Labour, which is quite controversial. But of course, now he's even had David Davis, is the former Brexit minister for Boris Johnson. Bear in mind, this is one of Boris Johnson's men. In Parliament, in public, stood up and quoted someone who recommended to Neville Chamberlain back before the breakout of World War I. My God, sir, throw in the towel, give in, resign, something like that. So open calls for resignation from his own party, from senior members of his own party in Parliament. And now, of course, so some people said that's actually helped because the person walking across the floor unified the tribe. So now the party will close ranks around him because that's a big blow. The latest thing, so in the last couple of hours, is that the people that have been or are threatening to write their letters of no confidence. So the Conservative Party has something called the 1922, is it a commission or board? Sorry, I forgot what it's called. The 1922 board table. I forgot what it's called. Nonetheless, you write your letter in, you send it to this individual, and then that's how the vote of no confidence process starts. So, but apparently Boris Johnson and his supporters and his team have been blackmailing people. So whether it is threatening to reduce, to pull funding away from their constituencies, bad publicity, there's all types of threats that have been come out. So one of the guy who defected already said he was threatened over funding for a school. So you're starting to see the real dirty politics, the dirty tricks behind the facade of all the pomp and Britishness of British Parliament, here, all that kind of stuff. You're seeing the dirty politics, the dirty laundry is coming out. How it actually works, the deals, the threatening, how the party whip works, all this kind of stuff is coming out. So pretty bad time for Boris Johnson. If he resigns, if he gets voted out, we're yet to see. He's holding out. He's not given any inch on that. He's still fighting. He hasn't given in or by any stretch of the imagination. So we'll have to see how that goes. And of course, the vote of no confidence hasn't yet materialized, but it's certainly there. The discontent within the party is rampant, let's say. Without going too much into the British politics, of course, the other thing we'd like to say is that a Tory MP defecting to Labour and then being given a podium to speak on kind of just shows how little difference there is between the Conservative Party and the Labour Party. There's just, one is just a softer version. Tory light, maybe, if you want to call that what New Labour might be called. But anyway, that's British politics for you. Any final comments on that, Jin?
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, I just want to say that it's delegitimization, not hopefully, at least, it'll be a delegitimization of the entire parliamentary bourgeois political system itself as a whole, instead of people just remember, this crazy guy with bad blonde hair that never brushes. Instead of, but with how capitalist society alienates everyone, I really think that's going to be the takeaway of at least some people, and that's sad to see. So that's my final thoughts.
Mm-hmm. So let's move on to another form of parliamentary politics, or let's say maybe it's congressional politics. I'm not sure. The Venezuelan situation. So. Mm-hmm. Cover us on that. What's happened? What's going on there?
Well, the Venezuelan parliament has they're calling for a referendum to recall the Maduro as president, and of course it's done by American allies, and it's probably not going to go through because. Although all the factions that's calling for that's anti-Maduro and has quote unquote made an air quotes alliance with one another, they are still fighting for their own self-interest and therefore cannot get anywhere. It's just completely unrealistic for them to unite their efforts. I mean, to quote one of our good friend and comrades, I'm going to just read the quote, maybe with...
Yeah, please, go ahead.
Quote, "Nothing will come of it. There is not an opposition force in Venezuela. There is multiple ones with a plethora of conflicting agendas. There's the Corina group openly calling to for armed intervention of the United States, electoral subversion. The Guaido gang traveling like a member of the royalty all around the globe, calling himself the president, including photo ops with lib like AOC." And groups like the Voluntad Popular that don't recognize Guaido, but neither takes partakes in elections. America invested too much money on its agents and yet failed to organize them. LMAO.
Well, let's leave it at that. I think that summarizes it enough. You have this motion. So I think the name of the body is the Venezuelan Electoral Authority has approved 3 requests to initiate the procedure for a recall referendum, marking the beginning of a long constitutional process that could eventually see Maduro removed from office. But as you said, there's a lot of other things underneath that at play. So I'm sure we'll hopefully see. Well, hopefully we'll not see Maduro out, and hopefully we can continue with the Bolivarian project. We'll keep covering that if anything happens, if anything comes of it. As we've seen, as you say, Guaido has not been a very successful agent of the U.S. So
he's lucky he didn't get torn to pieces by the Venezuelan people.
Right. Maybe he will. Who knows? But let's move on to China. A great piece of data is out. GDP, gross domestic product, that number that everyone is obsessed with for some reason. Why not? China's statistics out for 2021. China's GDP for 2021, or growth, I should say, 8.1% growth rate for 2021. So I'll show you a nice diagram here. Let's take a look at this. Yeah, this little thing here is from the Global Times. So this gives you a nice little chart showing you the different rates over the years. So here it is. Hope you can see that. Yeah. So we've got 2012, 7.9. And obviously the GDP growth rate was nice, 7.8, 7.4, 7, 6.8, 6.9, 6.7, 6. So we were seeing that sort of slow, maybe not going up, still above 5%, but coming down to 6 till 2019. Of course, in 2020, I think it was only China and Vietnam, I might be correct, I stand to be correct on that had any growth in the world. Many countries retracted by some big numbers, very big numbers. But of course, China still grew in 2020, but only by 2.3%. So even in 2020, we had growth in China. And of course, this year, I don't think this 8.1. What I want to get is some of 2020's growth is obviously delayed growth. So this is higher, I imagine, because of 2020. But nonetheless, the target was 6%, and we hit China hit 8.1. So yeah, some good statistics on that. Some nice progress. Just in case you missed it, we've already covered the end of the world episode where the Chinese economy, whether you're looking at PPP or in total value by PricewaterhouseCoopers, the other one by McKinsey, both of those institutions rank the Chinese economy as being the largest in the world. So we've already kind of passed that. So this is just making it bigger. This is just now getting into that. This is just doing victory laps now, basically, around the US.
Right.
But GDP, but actually, this is something that I would like to mention is that I forgot which.
I apologize. Some motorcycle just.
That's okay. I can't hear it. You can't hear it. Don't worry.
Okay.
I think the important point to make here is that someone, one of the top Chinese officials, maybe you can tell me who this was, Jin, said that GDP is not the be-all and end-all. People's well-being and people's lives, improving people's living conditions is the goal of the CPC. that is true progress. That is what we're aiming for. We don't really care about the total GDP statistic.
Right. I mean, there's lots of things that can be said here because China, when calculating its GDP, does not even calculate the what it considers to be not real GDP, as in any kind of purely finance-based transactions. But the United States economy is based off of that. So if you don't calculate that, then U.S. economy just dips at around the scale of Japanese economy. So, but anyways, let's not get into that too much.
Sure.
Because as I kind of foreshadowed this at the beginning of the episode, civilization is effectively what was being talked about here by the I believe is Hua Chunying, the Chinese spokesperson of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, I believe.
Sure.
That's essentially what was implied by her. I mean, people, China, and along with the DPRK and arguably Vietnam and Cuba are some of the last places on Earth where you can have normal production, normal lives, normal entertainment without like it being a suicide run for your health or just like your life in general. So based off of that, of course the Chinese economy is going to be the only one that's growing because China had the social structural system to be the quote unquote the industrial capital, the industrial center of the world.
Yeah,
and it was just a matter of cost because maybe some places in the world really is more efficient at producing another thing. Therefore, the market prefers, and it is actually efficient that way. But you have to like one thing that we immediately start to notice is the efficiency of the capitalist system is purely based on over specialization, as it is so rigid that it only adapts to one condition. As soon as the condition, the overall context of the world changes with something like COVID, everything just goes into the dustbin. Whereas China, with its centralized and decentralized flexible system, is able to adapt to these kinds of things right away. And now it is simply more efficient to have any kind of production to be in China than anywhere else in the world. Why? Because you don't have to worry about your workers dying. That's first of all. I mean, it's not all like sunshine and rainbow this year. The Chinese birth rate is has gone to a historical low, right?
Yes.
So what we're seeing is like that's the result of kind of ultra competitive capitalist thinking, and combined with like some of the more negative aspects of the Chinese Confucius culture, where like, oh, you have to be the best of the best. But like, come on, there's literally 1.7 billion people with a B. Like, how could you be the best? Like, it's not possible. What are you like? So, but then like that really kind of puts people in a place of self-doubt and defeatism, where even if they could afford a perfectly happy life for them and their child, they don't choose to because they're not the best of the best. So, like the overall like theme that unifies today's and every week's episode is really that the kind of to use a video game term, mini-maxed, as in like you have maximized your efficiency onto this very miniature aspect or field. This kind of overly concentrated kind of thinking, and along with Richard, your conversation about the autarky and all, it's just not good. No matter if you're talking about an individual, a society, or a nation, or economy, or whatever it may be, it's unscientific. It's irrational. It's based off of the Western capitalist theories of zero-sum competition. It's It's just anti-civilization, and we can pretty much, try as you will. You can find almost that everything in the world can be attributed to some version of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think. Well, I'm not going to go into all of those. We haven't got time to go into all of those, but I think we should talk about some of the. We shouldn't be too, 8.1% GDP growth is brilliant. That's good, but yes, not everything is sunshine and rainbows in China. I think things like 996, the work culture, and as you said, the birth rate, the demographic crisis, as they call it. There are challenges, many challenges. So it's not. We can't go into all of those today, but we should cover them at some point in the future. We can talk about these things, problems within China. Sort of, maybe we can go cover all of this.
Sure.
But let's just jump quickly onto the lithium story. So it's sort of three stories in one. The first story is that a Chinese firm has won a big bid to, of course, start mining lithium in Chile. $121 million of a contract where they will look for 160,000 tons of lithium. And the name of the the name of the Chinese country is Build Your Dreams, BYD. I think they make cars. Yeah, of course they make electric cars. And then, of course, the other side of the story is that, of course, there's a bidding process that's been suspended. And it seems to be that there's obviously some sort of conflict, or let's say a battle taking place in Chile over who gets to control, the lithium. So you've got a mining sector. Perhaps it's an incumbent one. You've got the Chinese mining companies also want to come in and, of course, and mine. But you also have then, of course, environmental activists involved. I think we haven't got enough time to cover all of this again, but this is another story we do need to get into, which particularly also if we consider the lithium mining in Congo. It's very interesting. And, of course, now that we have, the requirement to switch to, carbon-free or carbon-neutral fuel and battery-powered means of production, of sort of using more batteries, using lithium. Lithium mining is now potentially the new oil of the 21st century, if you will. But we haven't got time to cover all of that. So it's just a point to note is that, of course, lithium contests over lithium are taking place in Chile.
Right.
It will be interesting to see if the US decides to get involved to promote democracy and to free the people of Chile from their new leftist leader.
Right. Back in the day, the joke was if you're into cooking, if you put too much oil on the food, it will be the joke by the famous or infamous Gordon Ramsay is that you put so much oil on your food that the United States wants to invade your plate.
Yes.
But now I guess that joke, there's going to be a new generation of lithium jokes. If
lithium jokes, look out for lithium jokes. Yeah, maybe we can come up with them first. Yeah.
Sure.
Okay. So let's move on to a very important story, I think, which we need to cover, which is something that I think should always be reminded. We should always remind ourselves. We will not let this slip by without anyone noticing. Is that in Palestine, occupied East Jerusalem, this neighborhood, Sheikh Jarrah, which was sort of quite big in the headlines last year. It was the flashpoint which started the conflict, the airstrikes that the Israelis were sort of launching on Gaza and rockets being sent back the other way, is Sheikh Jarrah. So that neighborhood, Sheikh Jarrah. So a Palestinian family was evicted this week from Sheikh Jarrah. So this particular neighborhood, if you've not been following it, it's a small neighborhood in East Jerusalem, and there are a number of settlers which have been trying to take homes. Now, bear in mind, the Palestinians that live here, many of them moved here after the first loss of their homes during the 1948 war. And then, they were refugees and they were then moved to this neighborhood. And now they're being forced, and this is pressure to get them out. And of course, this is the long project of the Zionists, the settlers, to try and claim all of Jerusalem as the capital of their Israeli, colonial state project thing. So yes, that's what's happened now. So this particular house is they did a midnight raid, a dawn raid, broke into the house, got the family out, pulled them out with kicking and screaming, and then they bulldoze the house. Now, the argument, just to use the language, which I think is an interesting element of the story, is that the Israeli state said that, oh no, they needed to, destroy this home so that they could build a school for disabled kids, a school for both Palestinian and Israeli disabled kids. Meanwhile, there's an empty lot of land nearby, which has been marked out for a Jewish seminary. But so you could quite easily have built this facility there in some shape or form.
Right.
So just using something that could be said like, oh, it's to build a school for the disabled kids. We're not doing anything wrong here. No, it's just they're just standing in the way of progress. Something like this. Anyway, the point is that right now we have to remind ourselves that apartheid is being practiced, is being carried out in Palestine by forces funded by the US. Like the US pays most of that defense budget. And if you're talking about human rights, if ever you hear the US talk about human rights, just remind yourself that the US is paying for apartheid right now in Palestine. Or Israel, I should say. So, let's just remind ourselves. So let's not forget that is still happening. And we must, if you are, aware of any links to, I don't know whether it's the Palestinian Solidarity Organization, but I don't know. Just remember, we cannot forget our comrades in the struggle there, the Palestinians. So, that is what's happening this week. Hopefully, I don't know what will come of it, but I don't know. Good luck to the Palestinians. Next story, though, talking about people that are also resisting imperialism in some shape or form. The Houthis, the Houthi rebels. So, do you want to cover this one, Jen?
Sure. I mean, it's they were able to launch an attack against the UAE, as they always have. But the difference is that this time is, I believe, the first time that they were able to do it in the UAE territory.
Right. Yeah.
And that is quite significant. I want to kind of, the Houthi armed forces is, I don't know how to describe this. I guess you could call them like a kind of like a sovereign actor that actually has. They're more than just a gang of guerrillas. They are the government, the de facto government of the people of the region, and they do a lot of very socialist things, and they are they have agriculture, production, industry, and this might surprise a lot of people. They are in fact right up there with North Korea in terms of missile technology. They're capable of manufacturing, of course, with the help of Iran, but still their own ballistic missile and sub-hypersonic missile. So they are by no means just your
guerrillas,
your stereotypical guy with an AK and sandals.
Right.
No.
That's
right. And so it's I won't comment on like whether or not socialists should support them or not. Like, make your own judgment on that. But what I will say is that they are definitely fighting for another force that's like fighting for the liberation of their people in the fullest sense of those words. And they're by no means, quote unquote, backwards, because clearly, if you know your mathematics and you can organize an industrial society to be able to produce the kind of things that the United States cannot even produce. Because again, hypersonic shenanigans. Then clearly, they are a modern sovereign being to be reckoned with.
Yeah,
that's
I think,
at least less reactionary than whatever on God UAE. What even is that? So that's all I'm going to say for now.
Sure. I think that's I like your point. The Houthis are able to do it. It's a drone. They use a drone to strike to oil tankers. So just to clarify, I wasn't sure earlier. It was so they managed to explode fuel tankers. Okay, cool. I'm using a drone attack. Okay, and this is in the UAE. So previously they'd always attacked Saudi facilities, but the UAE is also supporting the war against against the Houthis.
Of course.
So, but particularly, I think in terms of their struggle, I think you have to take sort of other resistance movements, other anti-imperialist forces need to take a sort of feather out of their, or take a note of what the Houthis are able to do. So bear in mind the Saudis and the UAE have the British, the Royal Air Force, the US Air Force trains their pilots. They have technology from the US. They have
M1A2 tanks. They have
all of the tech. They have all of the tech and all of the money. They have the best.
All of the money.
Yeah, and all the money. They have everything you should need to win and crush an insurgency.
And yet, and the footages online continuously come out to of the Houthis absolutely destroying the Saudi military. I mean, the Saudi military is so filthy rich. Let me give everyone here just an idea. A Javelin missile, which is like $1 million per shot. Is that roughly correct?
I don't think it's that high, but it's a lot of money. I think it's more like 100,000.
Right, like at least in the hundreds of thousands.
Yeah.
They use that to shoot. That's supposed to kill tanks, because if you are destroying an expensive battle tank, that's kind of worth it. The checkbook kind of balances out.
Yes.
They shoot because they don't want to. These Saudi soldiers don't want to risk themselves in a firefight, and they have so much money. They have been just shooting javelins at infantry.
Yes.
What is like?
So I think for the Houthis to be able to take a drone and with their limited capabilities to strike right at the heart of the UAE, and bear in mind this is not their biggest attack. They were able to blow up, I think it was last year, the largest oil refinery in the world, and that really shocked the whole world because that's they had
because they showed the world that they had cruise missile capabilities. Which is just like so out of this world, right?
Yeah, but anyway, we do need to wrap up. So, good luck to the Houthis in their struggle against the Saudi Arabian dictatorship, I suppose, or incursion, and trying to carve out a space for their own country. So, good luck to the Houthis. And the last thing we're going to cover is the world's largest quadruped bionic robot for delivery reconnaissance tasks. Just a bit of fun, just to see something different for a change. This was developed in China, and I like the term. There's different terms you can use here. Horse, a four-legged animal, whatever you want to go for. They've called it the mechanical yak. They've gone for the mechanical yak, which I think is nice, which is a bit more fun. But there it is there in all its glory, if you can see that. 1 second. There it is, the mechanical yak. So this is the world's biggest quadruped robot. So obviously this is for exploration, also for military operations, but it can carry lots of heavy things. There we go.
Just a quick note, if anybody is familiar with the Romance of the Three Kingdoms, which spawned a whole bunch of fighting games and total war games. One of the mythological elements in that is the great strategist Zhuge Liang was able to invent this mechanical automated cow or horse that is able to assist with troops of carrying loads in difficult terrains. That's one supposedly it's like lost technology or whatever. But no matter.
I think
here's the real deal.
I'm glad we could end by looking at mechanical yak and mentioning one of the greatest pieces of literature, the Romance of the Three Kingdoms.
Romance of Three Kingdoms.
Brilliant. It's poetry, machinery, and all of that. Great. So thank you, Jen. It was wonderful chatting to you again. And
thank you.
Next week we will be having a guest with us. So we'll have a guest.
Yes.
We'll confirm it in the week. You might know who he is. He's quite.
Yeah, we'll probably post it on our Facebook official Facebook page and our Discord server.
Yes, that too. So thank you very much for joining us. Thank you, Jen, and we'll see you everyone next week, everyone.